Good evening. My name is Wahid Qureshi, and you are watching Centuries Untold, where we will journey together and try to answer questions like how, when, why, and what. So today's topic is another interesting video for my viewers. This time, the topic that I chose, that I wanted to talk about, is has to do with the Ottoman Empire. Okay, and this topic is very interesting for many reasons. It is interesting because it covers an area, it covers a time which has a lot of dimensions for a lot of people, for a lot of countries, even for all the three continents. It is also interesting. It is a kind of what we call a lessons learned. So I want to talk about Ottoman Empire briefly. My I will try to you know uh, limit my lecture, today's lesson lecture topic, for no more than 35 to 40 minutes. Okay, and there's a lot to cover, but it's going to be very interesting for my viewers. And I'm going to talk about certain areas, certain few things I will share, which you may or may not have heard about it. Okay, but I'm going to tell you the true picture of it without any bias. Okay, so let's start this video about the Ottoman Empire. So my viewers, as you know, so what is the Ottoman Empire? When you hear this word, the Ottoman Empire, what does that mean really? What comes to your mind? Okay, so the word Ottoman is basically an English word, right? It was given by Western European countries like particularly England and France and Holland, those countries, Ottoman, right? But it's really it is in the Islamic world, or in the Turkish world, or in Islamic world basically, it is basically based on the founder of this dynasty, Osman. Okay, and some of you probably have seen this in Arabic language. Osman is also spelled as Othman, with Othman, Othman. Okay, and some people spell it as Osman, Osman, but Othman is also spelled in Arabic language sometimes. So that's the word based on its real founder, Osman, and it basically got corrupted over the centuries. In Europe, in Western Christian world, it became known as Ottoman. Okay, so we will just call it Ottoman for this lecture. Okay, and but by the way, in Turkish language, in Islamic world, in the Turkish language, it is also known as Osmanli, like Osmanians, and what we call a Osmani dynasty, based on Osman, right? So that is the origin of this Ottoman, the word itself. Okay, viewers, as most of you already know and heard, and especially in the last few years when there are some really, I think that the Turkish media, Turkish movie industry has made some interesting movies, documentaries on Ottoman Empire. So a lot of people got to know a little bit more on that. But I'm not going to focus on the detailed history of Ottoman Empire, right? I'm going to talk about a little bit, but I want to move on something else, okay? And that is what I call a scholarly discussion, okay? So I'm going to go briefly its origin. So as my viewers, you know, the Ottoman or Osmani family dynasty belonged to a Turkish tribe called Kai. Okay, a Kai tribe that basically migrated from Central Asia sometime around 11th century. Now, viewers, this is the same time period when Mongols were coming out under Genghis Khan. Remember, Genghis Khan was born in 1167 and he died in 1227. Okay, so that's the same time period. Because of the Mongol invasion of Central Asia, a lot of Turkish tribes were forced to leave their homeland and move toward west. When I say west, I mean Western Asia, like Iran, Iraq, Syria, and some went north, which is present day Turkey. Okay, in my map behind, you can see during that time what it looked like. Okay, so that is the Kai tribe's origin. They were wandering from basically what you call it Anatolia. Anatolia, viewers, is the same region where present day the main country of Turkey is located. If you look at the back, the central part of Turkey today and eastern part of Turkey, basically that's called Anatolia. That is the original homeland for the early Turkish tribes when they moved from Central Asia into Anatolia around 12th century. Okay, and continue to do that even in 13th century, which is around 1200s, when Mongol were really creating havoc on Western Asia, Central Asia, China, Eastern Europe, under Genghis Khan. We all know the history of that. So this Kai tribe settled in Anatolia first, and then they keep moving westward, meaning the current country of Turkey on their western side. Okay, now at some point around 1230, 1240, they settled down what is today's Western Turkey, like Izmir, Konya, around that area. Okay, and viewers, that time the Syria and Jerusalem and part of Egypt were under the family control of Salahuddin Ayyubi, and it's called Ayyubid dynasty. So one of Sultan Salahuddin Ayyubi's grandson was ruling that time. Now, viewers, this is the same time when our famous Ertugrul was born. So Ertugrul was born around that time, 1205 AD. Okay, so that time period is about that. So anyway, so Kai tribe was making a lot of effort. The life was very, very hard. So don't think life was very easy for these people. No, it was very hard. It was a nomadic life, as you can imagine. They were under the constant threat of other tribes, under the threat of Mongols, and also internal conflict. Okay. But fortunately for Kai tribe, Ertugrul was a great leader. Okay, he managed the tribe effectively after his father's death, and he became the head of Kai tribe. And under Ertugrul's leadership, the Kai tribe made a lot of progress. And eventually, the Ayyubi king, whose capital was Aleppo, which is also known as Halb, granted some lands to Kai tribe, which is close to the pretty much western part of Turkey, which is today's the city of Sogut and Bursa. Okay, so they gave that area land to this tribe. The purpose was really to protect Ayyubid dynasty from the attacks from Byzantine kingdom. Byzantine, by the way, if you look at the map, Byzantine are the what the kings were ruling from Constantinople, which is later became Istanbul. Okay, so Kai tribe basically became a buffer between the Byzantine kings and the Ayyubid dynasty in Western Asia, like Syria, Egypt, Palestine, and that area. So Kai tribe was in the middle to protect. So Ertugrul faithfully served that purpose. But by the end of his life, Ertugrul was able to capture the city of Sogut. As you know, Sogut became the first capital, the headquarters for Kai tribe. So fast forward. So Ertugrul died in 1284, and then his son Osman becomes the new head, new chief of that tribe. Now it is Osman who actually really extended the frontier boundary. So that's why it is him that dynasty is named after Osman, Osmanli or Ottoman. Okay, so that's under his name, not under Artughul, but under his son Osman. Now Osman dies around 325 AD, but by the time of his death, the Ottomans or Kai tribe at that point were no longer a small tribe. They were really a force at that time. And after Osman's death in 1325, his son Orhan became the next tribe. Now, here's the change that takes place. After Osman's death, they changed the name from this tribe started to be known as Osman or Osmanli or Ottoman based on Osman. They stopped using the word Kai. Okay? So from Orhan and onward, now they are known as Osmanli. Okay? So keep that in mind. So these Orhan under his Murad and all those people continued the expansion basically. Now in 1356, remember this year, 1356, I believe under Orhan's son, the Ottomans or Osmanli first time crossed inside the Europe at the request of the Greek or the Byzantine king. So that's the first time they entered that side, and they never came back after that. Okay, so we move forward. Okay, we move forward. So the kingdom grows, and you know the famous Battle of Kosovo that happened in 1389, which basically pretty much solidify Ottoman Empire as a big force. Remember at that time, they were no longer under Ayyubid dynasty. They were independent, and they start calling themselves Sultan or the king. Okay, now they were controlling part of a Byzantine Empire, which is present day Greece. Okay, so viewers, as you can see, right from the time of Artughul the Great, I call him, all the way to Murad, Orhan, Usman, they produce great leaders, warriors, conquerors, one after the other, one after the other, one after the other. They were able to expand into Europe. And by the way, when they were expanding into Eastern Europe, they were also trying to consolidate Anatolia region. There were other Turkish tribes in Anatolia, as I mentioned before, right? So they were also coming under Ottoman flag because they knew now this is a big force now, so we are better off under their flag. So other Turkish tribes who were still scattered in Anatolia and central Turkey, they also came under Ottoman. So they expanded on the east side as well. Okay, and they were also started to expand south. South means Syria and Iraq eventually. So they were expanding really big time. And the European or you can say Christian armies at that time, Eastern Europe, they were putting armies after armies after armies, but they were able to defeat all of them. I mean, that's the great accomplishment in less than 100 years. Okay. Now, as we know that the conquest of Constantinople that took place in 1453 under Sultan Muhammad the Conqueror. Now, one thing I want to clear here, in Turkey he is known as Mehmet the Conqueror. Okay, so I want to correct this. In his lifetime, he was known as Sultan Muhammad, and then because he conquered Constantinople, Istanbul, he was given the title Fateh. Okay, that means Sultan Muhammad Fateh. Now, eventually, later in the centuries, in Turkish language, they kind of corrupted the name Muhammad into Mehmet. But in his lifetime, he was known as Sultan Muhammad. not Mehmet. Okay, Mehmet name was adopted later on. That's important. Okay, so everywhere, anywhere you hear this name Mehmet, it's really mean Muhammad. Okay, so Ottoman Empire under him expands further into other areas in Eastern Europe, and then under his grandson Sultan Suleiman even expanded more into Hungary, Budapest, Yugoslavia, Romania. So pretty much all the Eastern European countries were under Ottoman by the time Sultan Suleiman died in 1566. So now Ottoman Empire was ruling three continents: Europe, Asia, and North Africa. When I say North Africa, I mean the Egypt, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya. So viewers can imagine this empire now has become a really a world power, a superpower. Okay, not only in the Islamic world. By the way, in 1517, Sultan Selim I took Makkah and Medina, two holy lands, and then he also declared himself Khalifa, the Caliph. So from 1517 onward, the Turkish Sultan, also known as Sultan Khalifa, mean he had two titles, Sultan and Khalifa. Khalifa means that he is the Khalifa of the Islamic world, basically, because he was controlling Makkah and Medina, both two cities, holy cities. Okay? So viewers, this expansion into Europe, particularly into Europe, continued throughout 16th century and 17th century. There was a time in 1529, there was a time during the Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent's time. He's known as in Europe as Magnificent, Suleiman Shah Shokat, Suleiman Kanuni, lawgiver, right? So in his time, he actually attacked the capital of Austria, Vienna. Vienna was besieged by Ottoman army in 1529. They almost took the city of Vienna. Okay, and there is a reason behind why he did not. I mean, I'm not going to go into that detail, but you can read that why he did not take the city of Vienna in 1529. So Ottoman were still on the rise. But viewers, what happened after 17th century? Now the other European powers like England, France, Holland, Spain, they were also on the rise. Okay, so by the time 17th century ended, like meaning 1600 ended, Ottoman Empire was now, what you call it, no longer very offensive what they were 100 years ago, 50 years ago. Why? Because I'm going to go into that detail. What happened? One of the main reasons was that Western European countries, like I said, France, England, Spain, Holland, Germany, they were on the rise. When I say on the rise, they are not just military terms, or culturally speaking, society-wise. Their society was evolving. Okay, so but Ottoman Empire survived another few hundred years, right? Because it was such a big joint, and Mediterranean. Their navy was very strong. They conquered pretty much every island in Eastern Mediterranean, like Malta, Crete, Rhode Island, all those Cyprus, all those islands. So literally, there was a time in 16th century when Eastern Mediterranean became an Ottoman lake. Navy was so powerful. But they also suffered a defeat in 1571 at the Battle of Lepanto against Christian alliance. So this tussle was going between Christian powers of Europe and between Ottomans. They were continued throughout 15th, 16th, 17th centuries. But comes 18th century, there was another power emerged in Europe. And then part of the 18th century and 19th century, the focus of the Ottoman wars was shifted from Eastern Europe into pretty much like northern side Europe, like Russia. So now, if you notice, during the 18th century, meaning during 1700s and 1800s, a lot of Ottoman wars were fought against a Russian Empire. Okay, and unfortunately, those battles, Ottoman Empire suffered defeats. They lost Black Sea area, they lost Crimea, for example, they lost northern part of Romania. So now they were literally at defense. They no longer were the power that was expanding. So comes 1800, that was totally on the defensive side. They were losing territories fast in Eastern Europe, but they were still holding power in Islamic world, meaning in Egypt, Algeria, Syria, Iraq, Palestine, and Hijaz, the Holy Land. They were still holding there. But in Eastern Europe, they were losing territory fast. Okay, even during 1800, Egypt also revolted under Muhammad Ali. So Egypt was pretty much lost to them in around 1800, early 1810. Now comes a big setback in 1820s. What was that? The loss of Greece. Greek became an independent country. They got their independence from Ottomans after 400 years rule. So Greece became an independent. They got their independence formally around 1820, in 1821. The only reason they were able to achieve the independence because Britain and France openly helped them against Ottoman. So Greece was gone by 1820s. Egypt was pretty much out of control, and uh, uh, the other Eastern European countries like Bulgaria, Hungary was gone even 18th century. They lost Hungary in 18th century. Okay, so they now pretty much lost Greece. They lost part of Romania. They lost part of Bulgaria. So viewers, you can see in 19th century the map of Ottoman Empire versus the map of 16th century Ottoman Empire. You can see the difference. It was a sad picture, okay, but that's how it was. So by the time in 19th century ended, Ottoman Empire they pretty much lost a lot of territories in Eastern Europe. I already told you Greece became independent in 1820s. Hungary was already gone even before that. Part of the Yugoslavia, which is today is called Bosnia, Serbia, Croatia, they also was lost eventually in late 1870s. Okay. So they were only holding few European territories by the end of 19th century. So when First World War started in 1914, there was a final. They lost everything. Ottoman Empire not only lost every single territory in Europe, but they also lost territories in Western Asia, meaning they lost Egypt forever. Algeria was gone, Libya was gone, Iraq became independent, came under British protection. Syria lost. Syria came under the protection of the French. Excuse me. Jerusalem, Palestine, those areas also became under British protection. And after the First World War, the Hijaz area, Mecca and Medina, Holy Lands, totally became a separate country. Under Saud, became Saudi Arabia, right? And new country was made called Jordan after First World War. So and then eventually the last straw came after Greek-Turkish wars of 1920. The Caliphate, the Ottoman Empire was abolished forever, permanently was done, and Turkey became a republic under Kemal Atatürk in 1923. Okay, so that is a short history. Now I want to come back to the other important piece. And during 19th century, now I want to talk about in the next 10-15 minutes what happened. Okay, that's the question. What happened? Not only what happened, but why it happened. Okay, A power that was that big in 16th, 17th century became down like this in less than 200 years. Why? Okay? I'm going to go over a few in the next 15 minutes. My viewers, in the late 19th century, when actually in 1840s, when Crimea War was fought in 1843, 1853, I believe, they, because of their own interest, political interest, and to contain Russian Empire, Britain and France came to help Ottoman Empire against Russia. So Ottoman Empire, British Empire, and the French Empire got together in Crimea, which is today in Black Sea area, port, and they fought against Russia, and they defeated Russia. All three powers. Okay. But after that, that was it. So by the time 1870, 1880, Ottoman Empire in Europe and was known as the sick man of Europe. That's right, the sick man of Europe. That's the title was given to it, the Ottoman Empire. That means other European powers, that's how they viewed Ottoman Empire. Basically, it's a sick man that needs some treatment, right? Because Ottoman Empire was a major European power for centuries, okay? It was not just Islamic power, it was a European power as well. So, what happened to the sick man of Europe? That's a question. So, viewers, I want to go over a few things which I believe was really caused this downfall, sad downfall. So, as we have noticed, the very first few Ottomans, Sultan, you can call it, they, if you look at what they did, how they did, what were their habits like, you see a contrast difference with the later sultans who came. Okay? One of the reasons that the decline, I think, was they adopted a policy which is, even though only lasted less than 100 years, but it really damaged the Ottoman from the core. What was that? It is called killing your own brothers to become a sultan, killing your own son to safeguard your own throne. Okay, that's bad. That's one thing. We in 21st century can talk about these brutalities, cruelties, right? But the fact remains that this was an unacceptable behavior, okay, that was displayed by those sultans at that time. Okay, they not only killed their brothers, but they killed them in cold-blooded. Like very brutality was shown to their own brothers, half brothers, the way they were butchered. Even as young princes, as young as 10 years old, were dragged and killed. Why? Because so that one sultan can rule carefree. That is a bad example. That's not only bad, inhuman and un-Islamic. Your faith, your religion does not tell you this. Second thing, well, part of the first thing, some sultan also killed their own sons. Now, I talked about Sultan Suleiman Kanuni, lawgiver, right? But what he did? He killed his own son, Mustafa, the most able prince. Why? Because his wife, the famous Queen Oran, was against him. She wanted her own son to become a sultan. So can you believe that Sultan Suleiman, which is known as the Magnificent, the Great, the Kanuni, lawgiver, killed his own son, eldest son, in front of him. He was strangled. The poor prince was strangled in front of him. What kind of father will do that? Okay. That's the thing. Second part, which I believe caused more damage. Viewers, what happened? If a society does not evolve with the time, that society becomes decayed eventually and wipe out. That's a law of nature. Okay? So what happened during the 50, any time, if you look at 1500, right, when 1500 started, look at the Western European countries. I'm not talking about Eastern European countries because they were under Ottomans, right? I'm talking about England, France, Spain, Italy, Germany, Holland, Sweden, Norway, those countries. 1500, Ottoman Empire and those Western European countries. You look at their societies. Their societies was going from here to there. They were there and they stayed there. Meaning, there was no, in Ottoman time, there was no research on science. There was no research on medicines. There was no like a known university that they built. There was no astronomy research, right? There was nothing that the Islam taught them that they could implement. In military terms, also, they did not improve their military. There's, but on the other hand, by the time 1600 arrives, Ottoman society is still at this level. 1600 is now the Western European societies are going like this. How, example, if you look at during the 1600, how many scientists you can think of that Western European countries produced? I can give you a few names. Isaac Newton. Yes, he was born in 17th century, 1600. Leipzig, the mathematician, German mathematician. Von Leeuwenhoek, who invented the microscope. I can name few more, right? Galileo. Can you name some known scientists, researchers in Ottoman society? No, I don't. I cannot think of. Yeah, there was a great builder by the name Sinan, but that's it. I'm talking about the things that really move a society to the next level. The Ottoman Empire was fighting European powers, Christian powers, but they ignored that part of that, those countries are now developing rapidly. There was a renaissance in Italy, right? Late 1400, 1500, renaissance. What does that mean? But Ottoman Empire stayed inertia. There was no new ideas coming into this. And the role of Sultan was really sad. They did not encourage anything. They were busy marrying multiple women. They were busy filling their harem with concubines. Okay? They were busy building maybe palaces, gardens, things like that. Luxury. But they did not pay attention on research, medicine, science, astronomy, new military science techniques, upgrading the navy. No, I don't see any example, which is sad. But on the other hand, those powers were rapidly going up. Okay? I'm not even talking about 18th century. 18th century is a different story, like 1700s. In 18th century is a full of, if you go and look at England, France, Germany, Holland, you will see a never-ending list of scientists, researchers. Not only that, but they also reformed the society itself. Ottoman Empire stayed on the 12th century mindset. Okay? That was a major drawback. They did not improve with the time. Okay? Can you name a famous university in Istanbul after the conquest of Istanbul in 1453 that is world known? Can you name one? Okay? Like Oxford, Cambridge, like some other universities in Europe. Can you name some? They were also, founded around 1400, 1300 maybe. My viewers, if you know a world famous university that was built after the conquest of Istanbul, please let me know. Maybe I'm not aware of it. Okay? Any research was established in Istanbul or other part of Ottoman Empire, let me know. I don't think so. Okay? So that is other reason for their major reason for their fall. Okay? The third thing is they became eventually around 17th century, 18th century, the Ottoman sultans and the religious leaders, ulmas, became very much, deviated from the actual true Islamic teachings. Cruelty, brutality was common. Okay? Now, they did preach Ottoman Empire. But don't get confused with this that it was a very tolerant society. Yes, Ottoman Empire was a very tolerant society, but at the same time, it was a tolerant society. Like example, after Spain was lost, right, by Muslims, the Christian powers in Spain in 1492 expelled all Muslims, killed or expelled, and also expelled Jews. Where did those Jews go? They did not go to France, they did not go to Germany, they did not go to England. They went to Istanbul and they settled there. Why? Because Ottoman Sultan gave them a sanctuary and shelter, safety. That's why. So, under Ottoman Empire, the credit that you can give them is this. They were a very tolerant society. Sultan was very tolerant of other faiths, other minorities, groups, non-Muslims, Christians, right? Jews. So in Istanbul, you will find Armenians, Christians, Jews, Orthodox Christians, all sort of people, right? Living peacefully. You will never hear any incident during those centuries when intolerance was very common, that they were prosecuted, they were killed. You will not hear that. But during those centuries, you will see plenty of examples where in Europe, England, France, Germany, those countries, Holland, Spain, particularly Spain, where even the fellow Christians, if they were not at the same sect, they were burned to stake, they were butchered. So from that angle, yes, Ottoman Empire was very tolerant, which is basically a characteristic of Islamic empire in generally speaking anyway. You can go back in medieval time, even before, during the Abbasid time, you will always find a tolerance. Yeah. Okay? So Jews, especially Jews, lived under peacefully under Muslim rule than under Christian rule. That's the fact. Okay? Don't look at the present situation. That's political. So Ottoman Empire continued on the destruction, on decline path. Okay. By the time Sultan Abdul Hamid became Sultan in the 1870s, the things were out of control. I personally think he was a good Sultan. I think he tried to stem the tide and safeguard the Ottoman Empire from falling, but it was too late. The external powers were interfering in Ottoman Empire a lot. They were able to find hinds, meaning traitors, okay, inside Istanbul. Eventually, viewers, you know what happened. Turkey lost during First World War. Okay. One thing that also I want to mention, a factor, during the 19th century, viewers, if you look at the other European countries' history, there was the revolutions, in French Revolution, for example, right? There was the counter-revolutions. There was democracy on the rise. People's rights were established. People put a limit to the king's authority. But Ottomans, while they were fighting those powers, they did not materialize that. They did not adopt to the modern thinking, like, okay, let's open up our society. Okay? let's establish a parliament, let's establish some rule of law. No, the Sultan remained the final authority, like 500 years ago. It did not change, even 1870, 1880. Okay? Like I said, by the time Sultan Abdul Hamid became the Sultan, which I think he was a good Sultan, had he been in a good time. Okay? He tried his best, I think. Okay? But he had too many enemies. From within, even from his own household. They were hinds, they were traitors. Okay? But there was a lot of conspiracies by Germans, by British government, by French inside Istanbul during 1890s, early 1900, leading up to the First World War in 1914. There were Jews who were basically trying to take Palestine for their own country, which later on became a reality in 1940s, right? So there were a lot of factors which were not, he tried but he could not control. But then eventually the last straw came, and like I mentioned, during the First World War, Turkey lost bitterly basically, and they lost everything. It was only because Kemal Atatürk and his soldiers were pushed Greeks and other allied forces back. They were able to save the rest of the Turkey, which we know today. Okay, otherwise Istanbul, they could have lost more territory. So thanks to Atatürk, Kemal, that the rest of the Turkey, not just Atatürk, but his other commanders, other Turkish people. Viewers, I also want to say this. Maybe some people know, maybe don't. During that crucial, tough time for Turks, the Pakistani people, that time it was under British control in India, they also went and helped their Turkish Kardashis, their Turkish brothers. Okay? A lot of Turkish people know that Pakistani people that time helped them. They actually came and fought alongside Turkish people against Greeks and other European powers at that time in 1920s. Okay? So that is a brief background of Ottoman Empire, why it was called a sick bed, because it was literally a point in their history where they were literally like a sick bed in a real term. What to do with it? So this is a sad story at the end. I know people want to focus on the first few hundred years when they were expanding right and left, right? That's good. But what happened in the last 200 years? 200 years is a long time. Okay? There's a lesson to be learned here. So here's my question at the end. My question is this. Was Ottoman Empire a beneficial an empire to the people? That's one question I have. Was it a force of good in the world at that time? Third question. Did it really help societies during those centuries? Not just Eastern Europe, but Western Asia, to improve their lifestyle, their daily lives? Those are the questions. But only my viewers, you can judge, you can tell. Okay? I mean, I think Ottoman Empire, as a generally speaking, had, a lot of flaws. But at the same time, it was a force to be reckoned with for centuries. Here's my last message on this topic to my Turkish friends. Don't feel ashamed. Don't blame the Turkish Empire, the sultans, for Turkey's downfall at that time. It's doing good now, but that time. Don't blame them. Okay? Yes, every kingdom, every dynasty makes mistakes. Okay? The Ottoman empires were human. They also made a lot of blunders, mistakes. But they also gave a real sense of proudness, not to the Turkish people, but all over the Islamic world, in generally speaking. Okay? So please take pride on this past. Don't feel that because of the Ottoman Empire, Turkey fell behind. I just went over a lot of details. What were the reasons? It was not just the empire itself. What if Ottoman Empire was not? There was some other dynasties. Then what? You think they could have been better? Maybe not. So take pride in the past. While open to criticize, yes, you have a right to criticize it, but also take a pride on the Ottoman and empire, the kings, sultans, what they did. Okay? So that's my message to my Turkish Kardashians, friends, brothers, sisters. Okay? Thank you very much for watching my video. I hope this was informative to you, and I hope you learned few things today. Please give me your comments, and please subscribe to my channel so I can make more videos like this, and hit the bell icon so you get notification. Thank you very much, and good night, and Pakistan Zindabad and Turkey Zindabad, both. Good night.